Hello and welcome back to Nerd Doc. Enola Holmes 2 has released on Netflix, and this video explains the ending and historical significance, covers a few important plot points, and explores what could be next in a potential Enola Holmes 3. There are spoilers for Enola Holmes 2 in this video. There are also chapter timestamps, so you can jump around the video as you wish, and if you have any questions or we missed anything, leave a comment below and we'll answer as best we can. In Enola Holmes 2, Enola is tasked with finding a missing girl, Sarah Chapman. Sarah works in a matchstick factory and has recently disappeared. Enola discovers clues that lead her to William Lyon, the son of Henry Lyon, who owns the matchstick factory. Henry has a partnership with Charles McIntyre, and they've been prospering quite a bit after switching up the phosphorus used to make the matches. Unfortunately, a number of women who work at the factory have been dying. The factory owners claim that the women are dying of typhus. While this isn't true, it's an odd classification. The management at the factory checks inside the mouths of the women, with one woman shown having a swollen cheek and claimed to be infected with typhus. While typhus can refer to a number of illnesses around the time period, the most common illness consisted of flu-like symptoms and a rash, as well as delirium, sensitivity to light, and in some cases falling into a coma. There are no widely seen cases of typhus that involve a swelling of the cheek. The actual real disease was known as phossy jaw because it caused a phosphorus necrosis of the jaw, in which the jawbone would rot and have to be removed, oftentimes proving fatal. This whole part of the film is based in history and actually happened around the late 1800s. It was during the Industrial Revolution when factories weren't required to have safe working environments. Most of the real women worked at the Bryant and May factory and were issued fines just for being late, similar to the girls in the movie. The poor working conditions were brought to light by Annie Besant, who Sarah Chapman was loosely based on in the movie. There was also a strike, although it didn't happen in the same way that Sarah's strike occurs at the end of the movie, but it resulted in 1,400 women walking out. Their demands were eventually met, but the white phosphorus was still used all the way until 1906, nearly 20 years after the initial strike. Getting back to the movie, at the same time Enola was searching for Sarah Chapman, Sherlock was vexed by a case in which there was money missing from a number of bank accounts around London due to transfers that had gone unaccounted for. Sherlock assumed it was either bribery, extortion, or some form of blackmail. Basically, someone was transferring money out of the treasury and into a singular private bank account. Every time Sherlock would get close to discovering who it was, the money would get transferred to another private bank with a new anonymous account number. There were 27 transfers in total. The film ends with Enola discovering that Sarah found out what was actually killing the women at the factory. Sarah was working with her friend May and her lover, William Lyon, to uncover this fact. It was the change in phosphorus that caused the deaths. The new white phosphorus was fatal, which Sarah discovered by testing the old red phosphorus and the new white phosphorus against one another. Flies, plants, and rats all died when Sarah fed them or placed them near the white phosphorus. What was happening is that matches that used the red phosphorus cost more to make, meaning the factory owners didn't make as much profit. McIntyre had access to the new, much cheaper white phosphorus and proposed that they make a deal to switch them out. Both McIntyre and Lyon knew how dangerous the new phosphorus was, but a few women, or a few hundred women, dying was not as important as lining their pockets with money. Meanwhile, Mira Troy, who happened to be connected because she was the private secretary to McIntyre, was also the person that Sherlock was after, who was transferring money into a private bank account. Being so close to McIntyre, she had all the information she needed to make the transfers, which required much less documentation back in the 1800s compared to modern times. Mira was also a genius in math, and she was able to hide her money transfers and identity, all while coding the account numbers and location of the banks using the language of dance and numerical code that spelled out a quick message extending a greeting to Sherlock, as well as the name of his new adversary, Moriarty, which is an anagram for Mira Troy. Once the contract had gone missing, Mira's money scheme was in jeopardy. If the factory was closed down or the phosphorus was changed back to the original red, she would lose the constant stream of money. Mira anonymously hired Superintendent Grail and his police force in order to find the contract. This ended up leading them to Sarah and her accomplices, although Mira never intended for anyone to die. One interesting nod to Moriarty's knowledge is when she's found out and says that it's a shame her divertissement with Sherlock has come to an end. Divertissement means entertainment or diversion, but it also means a short ballet dance. Essentially, Mira was entertained by Sherlock, and her selected banks and account numbers were hidden in the language of dance. Anyway, where Mira made a mistake was in trying to pin the murder of William Lyon on Charles McIntyre. Mira set up William's death scene to look as though he was conversing with McIntyre at the time of his death, which would point the police and Sherlock to think it was McIntyre's doing. Sherlock saw through this, although Enola didn't, showing that she isn't quite up to Sherlock's level of detection just yet. It was a desperate move by Mira to avoid the complications that numerous murders would have caused. Mira's motivation in all this was simply that she felt she was smarter than most everyone else, yet couldn't amass the wealth or standing of the men simply because she was a woman. Mira deemed this to be unfair, and so she took matters into her own hands. McIntyre burns the contract, meaning there's no evidence of his wrongdoings. Luckily, Lord Tewkesbury has the power and standing to bring him to trial anyway, which he happens to do at the very end of the film. We also see that the paper Sherlock is looking at near the end of the movie confirms that Mira actually escaped her captors and is once again free. Moving on to the credit scene, we see Sherlock waiting on Enola to show up for their planned meeting the following Thursday. However, instead of Enola, it's Dr. John Watson, Sherlock's esteemed colleague and friend, although this is their first meeting. The reason this is happening is because Enola didn't want to see Sherlock alone after witnessing the state of his office and his life in general earlier in the movie. However, Enola has a life of her own, with her own cases and Tewkesbury as well. So instead of meeting him regularly, she finds a worthy colleague for Sherlock and sends him over at the designated meeting time. This essentially sets up the Sherlock Holmes people are most familiar with. So what's next for Enola Holmes? As of November 2022, Netflix has not yet greenlit a third film. However, based on the success of the first movie and the anticipation for the second movie, plus comments made by co-producer and star Millie Bobby Brown about wanting to do a third movie, it seems very likely it will happen. The second film was announced about 6 months after the first movie hit Netflix. If the same pattern occurs here, we can expect announcement around June of 2023, with a potential release date around late 2024 or very early 2025. The plot of a potential third movie is a bit harder to nail down. While the first two movies are based on the Enola Holmes Mysteries novels, the second movie is only a very loose adaptation. Our best guess is that a third Enola Holmes movie will utilize some of the plot elements from multiple novels. The first would be the case of the bizarre bouquets. With Dr. Watson being introduced at the end of Enola Holmes 2, it seems likely he will play a role in the potential sequel. In this specific novel, Watson goes missing and Enola uses the language of flowers to help solve the case, something we've seen her do in both movies already. Add in the return of Mira Troy as Moriarty, and perhaps serving as the main antagonist, and you have the potential for a great movie. It also wouldn't be out of the question to see Enola get married, or at least engaged to Lord Tewkesbury near the end of the film, especially given their evolving relationship over the first two films. This would bring the trilogy to a close, with Sherlock getting closer to Dr. Watson and Enola happily married. You may also have noticed that Mycroft, Enola's brother, wasn't in the second film. That was due to scheduling conflicts with the actor Sam Claflin. He also appears in the movie Book of Love and the most recent season of Peaky Blinders, which limited his availability. Assuming he's available for a potential third Enola Holmes movie, they could adapt part of the sixth book, The Case of the Gypsy Goodbye, in which Enola proves herself to Mycroft and Sherlock, and she's granted liberty instead of being one of their wards. Combining these two stories with a focus on Dr. Watson and Mycroft, along with the return of Moriarty, plus a potential marriage to Tewkesbury, and it would close out the Enola Holmes trilogy with a solid and satisfying conclusion. So what did you think of Enola Holmes 2? Was it better or worse than the first movie? And what do you think will happen in Enola Holmes 3? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. For now, that wraps up this video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who loves Millie Bobby Brown, Henry Cavill, and the Holmes family.